You can't really talk about innovation and influence in gaming without mentioning Final Fantasy. While FF7 might be the entry that most people remember for changing the industry and revolutionizing the RPG genre, it was far from the only groundbreaking title in the series. Almost every main in Final Fantasy brought something new that left a lasting mark on the RPG genre and even gaming as a whole. In fact, many of the most iconic features we associate with role-playing games today were either first introduced or perfected by the series. In this video, I want to talk about how Final Fantasy revolutionized gaming and still continues to do so, from bold approaches to storytelling, to unique and groundbreaking combat systems, and visual milestones that push hardware to its limits multiple times. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like as it helps the channel a lot, but for now, let's get straight into it. Before I talk about how Final Fantasy affected the gaming industry, it's important to first understand the RPG landscape before the franchise existed. In the late 80s, RPGs drew heavy inspiration from the tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons, featuring concepts like HP as health, hit points, and various character classes. Western games like Wizardry and Ultima followed this formula, often being text-heavy, with limited graphics and no real cinematic presentation. In Japan, Dragon Quest became the pioneer of the genre and the blueprint for early JRPGs. It was more colorful and charming than its Western counterparts, but still relied on simple turn-based combat, basic visuals, and first-person battle screens similar to classic dungeon crawlers. Around this time, Square, a small and struggling Japanese game developer, was facing bankruptcy after a series of failed releases for the Famicom system. Hironobu Sakaguchi, one of the company's directors, decided to make one last game before potentially leaving the gaming industry. Inspired by Ultima, Wizardry, and Dragon Quest, he set out to create an RPG with deeper storytelling, richer worlds, and a more cinematic presentation. The project became known as Final Fantasy, a game that would not only save Square, but also redefine what the RPG genre could be, laying the foundation for decades of innovation and influencing countless games for years to come. Before Final Fantasy, stories in RPGs were usually just a backdrop for the gameplay. The previously mentioned Western games had very basic plots and were mostly told through walls of text, pretty much completely relying on the player's imagination. Even Dragon Quest, despite its charm, kept its story extremely simple and was basically about a nameless hero defeating evil and saving the kingdom, without any real character development or twists that impacted the story. Final Fantasy took the concept and completely reimagined it. Instead of giving players a generic hero, the series began introducing playable characters with distinct personalities, backstories, and goals. Even the characters in the very first game had unique classes like Fighter, Thief, or Black Mage, giving them some sort of identity. By the time we got to Final Fantasy IV, we started seeing complex narratives which were never even attempted in console RPGs before. It was the first entry to focus on a strongly character-driven narrative, with elements like Cecil's redemption arc, Kane's inner conflict, and betrayals that actually impacted the player emotionally. From there, each new game built on the foundation, introducing more complex arcs, plot twists, and themes that resonated on a deeper level. Another innovation was the cinematic presentation. Final Fantasy started to incorporate scripted scenes that felt dramatic and alive instead of just static text boxes. We already started to see them in earlier games like FF4 or FF5, but it was Final Fantasy VII that pushed things further with pre-rendered cutscenes, which allowed for more cinematic moments, more often seen in movies rather than games. This was the turning point for the entire industry, setting a new standard for emotional storytelling. But what truly made Final Fantasy's narratives groundbreaking was their emotional depth. The series was willing to explore themes rarely seen in games at the time, like loss, sacrifice, identity, faith, and even humanity itself. Final Fantasy IV shocked players by including one of the first scripted, permanent character deaths in a console RPG, while Final Fantasy VII delivered one of gaming's most iconic and emotional moments, which was Aerith's death. The scene didn't just surprise players, but it proved that games could evoke the same emotional impact as books or movies. It also explored grief and healing through Cloud and the rest of the party, making it one of the most memorable journeys in gaming history. Later entries continued pushing these themes even further. Final Fantasy IX explored the meaning of friendship and mortality. Final Fantasy VII tackled faith, tradition, and challenging societal norms. And even Final Fantasy XIV, despite being an MMO, told one of gaming's most profound stories, dealing with identity, hope, and moving on from loss. That shift in narrative ambition didn't just influence other Japanese developers, but it reshaped the entire RPG genre. Games like Xenogears took inspiration from the character-focused narratives to tell one of the most ambitious sci-fi stories in gaming, and Persona built upon the focus on exploring identity and human relationships. These titles show how Final Fantasy didn't just innovate within its own franchise, but actually set the benchmark for what RPG storytelling could become. While storytelling was a huge part of Final Fantasy's appeal, its gameplay innovations were just as revolutionary and influential. From the very beginning, the series constantly experimented with ways to make combat, progression, and side content feel fresh, dynamic, and more engaging. One of the earliest breakthroughs came with Final Fantasy III, which introduced the now iconic job system. For the first time, players could freely switch character classes mid-game, opening up countless possibilities for party composition and strategy. The idea was refined and perfected in Final Fantasy V, where mixing and matching jobs and abilities allowed players to craft their own unique playstyles. The freedom and replayability this offered became hugely influential, inspiring modern titles like Bravely Default, Octopath Traveler, and even the most recent Like a Dragon titles, which start to incorporate the job system, only showing that the feature continues to thrive in JRPGs today. Another major innovation came with Final Fantasy IV, which introduced the famous ATB system. Unlike traditional turn-based combat, where players could take as long as they wanted to plan their next move, ATB added a real-time element where both the party members and enemies acted based on individual speed gauges. This combined the strategy of traditional RPGs with the urgency of real-time combat, forcing players to think quickly and adapt mid-fight. The system was so influential that it became a standard in the genre throughout the 1990s. Games like Grandia, Lunar, and even Chrono Trigger all adapted the ATB system to build on the dynamic turn-based combat. Even later Final Fantasy entries like FF7, 9, and 10-2 kept the system because it worked so well. As the series entered the PlayStation era, Final Fantasy pushed customization to an entirely new level. Final Fantasy VII introduced the materia system, letting players slot orbs into their equipment to unlock skills, abilities, and powerful summons. What made it so special was how flexible it was, as even characters with fixed roles like Barret or Aerith could completely be customized depending on the materia that you gave them. Final Fantasy X then brought the Sphere Grid, a massive interconnected skill tree that gave players total control over character progression. Both systems were groundbreaking at the time and inspired many developers to rethink approaches to RPG customization. A great example is Persona, which used its fusion mechanic to let players unlock new skills and abilities, in a way that felt strategic but still tied to the game's core themes. In the modern era, the series continued evolving its core combat mechanics. Final Fantasy XV marked the franchise's first full transition to real-time action combat, blending free movement, combos, and special abilities. Final Fantasy VII Remake used a similar approach with a hybrid system that combined fast-paced action with tactical menu-based commands, similar to the ATB system used in the original game. The series also played a major role in shaping endgame content. The very first game introduced what many consider to be the first ever super boss in a console RPG, the infamous Warmech, also known as the Death Machine. With only a 1% chance of appearing in the Flying Fortress, it was stronger than almost any other enemy in the game, including the final boss. Later entries will refine this concept, introducing optional post-game super bosses from Omega Weapon in FF5 to Emerald and Ruby weapons in FF7, all designed to truly challenge the player, which later became a standard across the RPG genre. Finally, there's one area where Final Fantasy arguably laid the foundation for the entire industry, which is minigames. The very first Final Fantasy hid a sliding tile puzzle aboard an airship, widely considered one of the earliest minigames ever in an RPG. From there, they became a tradition in the series, often evolving into proper activities of their own. Minigames like Triple Triad, Blitzball, Chocobo Racing, fishing, and even snowboarding weren't just small distractions, and they often came with dedicated side stories and meaningful rewards. Today, many franchises like The Legend of Zelda and Like a Dragon are known for their minigames, but it was actually Final Fantasy that helped pave the way for making them an essential part of the RPG experience. Final Fantasy's technical and visual achievements also set entirely new standards for what games could look and feel like. Across multiple generations, the series constantly pushed hardware to its limits and delivered experiences that often felt years ahead of their time, even by today's standards. The very first Final Fantasy cartridge carried an internal battery that allowed players to save their progress directly on the game, rather than starting fresh every time they turned on their console, which was groundbreaking at the time, especially for console RPGs that encouraged long play sessions. During the Super Nintendo era, Final Fantasy VI became one of the most technically impressive titles on the system. It used the Mode 7 graphical interface to create the illusion of 3D perspective, most notably during overworld navigation or the minecart escape sequence. Combined with highly detailed character sprites and scripted cinematic events, FF6 proved that RPGs could be just as visually engaging as action games. Then came Final Fantasy VII, which was a turning point not just for the series but for the entire industry. Its polygonal 3D models, pre-rendered backgrounds, and full-motion cutscenes made it one of the most revolutionary games of all time. The cinematic quality of its storytelling and visuals became the gold standard that other RPGs and even action games would spend years trying to match. With Final Fantasy X, the series embraced the power of the PlayStation 2, adding full voice acting, motion capture, and some of the most immersive character interactions seen in any game at the time. It was easily one of the most stunning titles available on the console, and its cinematic presentation made gameplay and storytelling feel more connected. And of course, there is one iconic aspect of Final Fantasy's visuals that deserves special attention, which are summons. They've been part of the series since the very first game, but Final Fantasy VII was the first one to give them dedicated, fully rendered 3D cinematics. Fast forward to FF16, and summons are now portrayed as godlike beings, locked in massive, playable cinematic battles that are one of the most impressive in modern gaming. It perfectly shows how the series has always leveraged new technology, not just for visual presentation, but to make its worlds feel more immersive and truly alive. What really makes Final Fantasy stand out from other long-running gaming franchises is probably its constant reinvention. While many series like Dragon Quest have kept a consistent formula across their entries, almost every Final Fantasy game offers a brand new world with a unique cast and setting, whether it's the medieval fantasy of FF9, the vibrant world of FF10, or the brotherly road trip in FF15, where reality meets fantasy. The series has also never shied away from taking risks, whether it's experimenting with bold new combat systems or even shifting into entirely new genres. FF15, for example, marked the franchise's first major leap into full action-based combat, something that wasn't really common in JRPGs at the time. While it's still a controversial game for many reasons, and plenty of fans disliked the shift away from traditional systems, it did succeed in attracting a much larger Western audience to the franchise. Even the director of Expedition 33 openly credited Hajime Tabata's creative approach and FF15's interactions between characters as a major inspiration for his project. More recently, FF16 went even further, with its fast-paced and combo-heavy combat inspired by the Devil May Cry series, also becoming the first mainline entry to receive an M rating, and further proving that the franchise isn't afraid to redefine what a Final Fantasy game can be. Perhaps the boldest innovation came with Final Fantasy XIV. After its troubled launch, the game was completely rebuilt into a realm reborn, making it one of the biggest comebacks in gaming history. It proved that a series mainly known for single-player experiences could thrive as an MMO while still feeling like Final Fantasy at its core. The ongoing patches and expansions kept the title in the center of both RPG and MMO conversation for years, especially during the launch of Endwalker, which broke player counts and servers. The game showed that the reinvention wasn't just about changing gameplay systems, but it was about reimagining what Final Fantasy could be in an era of online gaming. Of course, the willingness to reinvent hasn't always pleased everyone, and almost every new entry sparks debates within the fanbase, with some players embracing the changes, with others preferring the older style of the series. But in a way, this unpredictability has become a part of Final Fantasy's identity, helping it stay relevant for decades while constantly pushing boundaries. But that's it for the video. Let me know in the comments which Final Fantasy game stands out to you the most, and of course, feel free to drop your thoughts about the topic, and if you also feel like the series has left an impact on the RPG genre and the industry as a whole. As always, if you enjoyed the video and want to see more content centered around Final Fantasy and gaming as a whole, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.